The following is a guest post from Adam Moss, who goes by Roadgeek Adam in the comments. He's previously written guest posts on Tim McClelland, Frankie Crosetti, The Number 26, Casey Stengel, Leo DeRocca, Miller Huggins, Jerry Kenny, The Copacabana Incident, Mark Koenig, Earl Combs, Urban Shocker, and Michael Milosevic. Snuffy. Getty residents of the Jersey Shore must have thought it was just another day on September 15, 1958. The weather provided a wonderful, clear mid-September morning for those boarding Central Railroad of New Jersey Train 3314 out of Bayhead at 8:28 am. Destined for Communiport Terminal on the west shore of the Hudson River, hundreds would transfer to a ferry so they could reach jobs in Manhattan. The people on 3314 that morning read of a who's who of people who would make such a commute. On board was a mayor of a town on the Jersey Shore, a secret courier for the United States Army, an artist, chemical director, a law firm partner, even a 4-month-old baby. The train was supposed to make several stops, including Red Bank, New Jersey, where a 39-year-old foreign freight agent nearly missed his train for a luncheon in the city. After passing the Elizabethport station in Elizabeth, New Jersey, train 3314 sped up to approach the drawbridge over Newark Bay. In the blink of an eye, the two front locomotives and two of the coaches in the front of the train spilled off the tracks and into the waters below. Precariously, a third car dangled on the side of the bridge with numerous lives hanging in the balance. No one knew of the foreign freight agent, who had come down with the train into the waters below. This is a story about that 39-year-old foreign freight agent. Destined to be a Yankee, George Henry Sternweiss was born on October 26, 1918 in Manhattan as the son of Officer Andrew P. Sternweiss B. 1899 and Sophie C. Sternweiss Daly B. 1898. They were also natives of New York City. George Sternweiss was raised at 865 Van Nest Avenue in the Morris Park section of the Bronx. When he was 5, his parents gave birth to a second son, Andrew Sternweiss, Jr. 19,242,006. Andrew Sternweiss, Jr. ended up joining the Navy and serving for 28 years as a pilot. Sternweiss ended up going to the Fordham Prep School 441 East Fordham Road and was an All-City athlete for the varsity football team in 1934 and 1935. During this time period, he was a three-sport athlete, showing success in baseball where he led the team to the city championship and basketball where the team went the Bronx-Westchester CHSAA title. Yankees speedster, the late George Snuffy Sternweiss from his days as a Tar Heel at UNC. The Times, Munster, Indiana, April 26, 1943. Pic.twitter.com/4VP82Ju3, Adam Seth Moss, M.A. At Le Cine, September 10, 2017. While he attended Fordham Prep, George Sternweiss ended up applying and going to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Receiving an athletic scholarship, Sternweiss was the starting quarterback for 3 years. At UNC, Sternweiss was the terror of the grid known as Old 92. According to an article in the St. Louis Sporting News from 1942, Sternweiss averaged 6.2 yards carrying and in 1942 was the sixth-best punter in the entire nation. His punting statistics average 40.6 yards across the field. He was also playing baseball during this time period and earned the honor of being the captain for the football and baseball teams. No other Tar Heel had ever done such a thing. His time in football was so good the Chicago Cardinals drafted him in the second round of the 1940 draft. They were going to offer him $6,500 to play football. However, Sternweiss declined this, figuring that his career would go longer if he played baseball, in which he hit .391 in a 165 record for the Heels. On a hunch, a scout from the New York Yankees signed Sternweiss on the day of his graduation so he could play for his favorite team. His minor league career started higher than many others. The Yankees front office immediately assigned him to the Norfolk Tars of the Class Piedmont League. The aforementioned Sporting News article noted that it was at this level of baseball that players took note of Sternweiss' insane use of chewing tobacco and big black cigars. There he received the nickname that would stick with him, Snuffy the Bear, just Snuffy. At Norfolk in 1940, Sternweiss hit .307 and slugged .510 in 86 games, with 12 homers and 17 doubles. However, it was the tool of his speed that kept Stern Weiss a popular piece. Early scouting reports put Stern Weiss' speed as comparable to Joe Gordon, who would be a teammate in a few years. Many people felt that it was possible that Stern Weiss would end up replacing Gordon on the squad in a few years and that it was inevitable. His playing at Norfolk got him a promotion to Triple-A Newark to play for the Bears in the International League. In 1941, Stern Weiss did not knock the socks off the International League. His manager, the Detroit first baseman Johnny Noyne, seemed to be the weak point for his .264, .3 for 1.688 batting line in 100 games. He had only managed 21 steals with 5 home runs and 9 doubles in 96 hits. However, his season was cut short when he came down with stomach ulcers on August 15. At the point, the 21-year-old Stern Weiss went straight to the hospital and had them removed. It was believed that a collision at the plate with Ed Parsons of the Buffalo Bisons aggravated the problem, which the Bears never knew about. As a result of the ulcers, he had to reduce his use of cigars, but kept his insane chewing tobacco habit. Health issues involving his tobacco habit will come back later to haunt the infielder. The idea of destined to be a Yankee tells you how close he came to never being one. In July 1942, during a season in which he would bat .270, .340, .397 in 144 games for the Bears, Ed Barrow almost traded the infielder to the Brooklyn Dodgers. Thankfully, Barrow and Larry MacPhail got into a massive feud during this time and the deal was nixed. During the 1942 season, Stern Weiss demolished the league in several offensive categories, having 66 steals by July and having 103 runs scored and 105 runs batted in by August. Scouts noted though that Stern Weiss would need to be successful to make the majors, as his 5'8" frame was not going to help him. Stern Weiss would end the 1942 season, stealing 73 bases for Newark. A product of his time in December 1942, the Yankees decided to promote 8 members of the Newark Bears to bring some new blood into the team. The 1942 team had a lot of aging and retiring stars. Bill Dickey failed to catch 100 games for the first time since 1928. Lefty Gomez and Red Ruffing, the aces of the Yankees during the 1930s, were about to retire. On top of that, Frank Rossetti was required to serve a 30-day suspension for a run-in with umpires during the 1942 World Series. Red Rolfe retired to coach baseball at Yale University. On top of that, Phil Rizzuto and Buddy Hassard were in the military. As part of the 8-man group called up, the Yankees promoted Stern Weiss, Tommy Byrne, Hank Majeski, a hitting prodigy for the Bears, Bill Johnson, Bud Metheny and Russ Terry to hit for the team. On top of that, the Yankees promoted a new battery, with Milo Candini and Aaron Robinson being promoted as well. George Weiss made a joke to the media that he may have to play himself given the lack of players. The 1943 season around baseball had a hell of a crop of rookies that season, not just in New York. The Altoona Tribune noted that there were many new young stars that fans would look forward to. Aside of Stern Weiss and Johnson, the Red Sox had Eddie Legg, not really a rookie, but a good acquisition from the Cardinals to replace Johnny Pesky, along with Louis Lucia, a pitcher under the eye of Herb Pennock. The Tigers had Dick Wakefield, the Indians had future Yankee ace Ali Super Chief Reynolds. Finally, the Philadelphia Athletics and Connie Mack had a brand new infield of Eddie Mayo, Erwin Hall and Frank Scaff. It was one hell of a crop that year. After a good spring training, Joe McCarthy named Stern Weiss the starting shortstop with a scooter in the Navy. Stern Weiss would also take Rizzuto's place in the lineup, batting first as a leadoff speedster for the Yankees. McCarthy loved his speed, but felt he had the hitting ability to take the job. At the same time, Stern Weiss was to come up for the draft in late April and early May. Draft or no draft, Stern Weiss wasted no time proving Joe McCarthy's comments correct. By April 28, when Stern Weiss was to leave for Hartford, Connecticut about his draft status, he raised his average to .455 in the first month. Just 6 days prior, Snuffy got his first MLB hit in his debut against Early Wynn and the Washington Senators. During the early 1943 season, Stern Weiss married his sweetheart, Jane Powers, a die-hard baseball fan. Stern Weiss met Powers during his days in the minors, and when he was promoted to the majors in the spring, they tied the knot. Stern Weiss himself was considered a shy man, and Kevin Cook notes in his book Electric October 7 World Series Games, 6 Lives, 5 Minutes of Fame That Lasted Forever, that Stern Weiss handed the bat boy at Newark the following note: for Jane, please don't think of me too forward or rude. If you'd please tear this up, but seeing you today I'd enjoy nothing more than meeting you. Again, please don't think me forward. If you find it convenient I'd like to call you George Stern Weiss too. Stern Weiss tried the winter prior to enlist as a naval aviation cadet to serve his country. However, the stomach ulcers his smoking caused in 1941 caused the military to decline him originally. Despite that, Stern Weiss still departed the team on April 28 to take an examination to see if he was eligible. Thanks to some confusion in his status, they moved the place of his testing from Virginia to Hartford, and club officials noted there was doubt Stern Weiss would be accepted this time around. That ended up being the result, as Stern Weiss was sent back to the Yankees instead of being drafted. That said, the 1943 season was one Stern Weiss would rather have forgotten. Despite the early hot hitting, Stern Weiss finished the season with a .219, .333, .288 batting line as the backup to Crosetti and Joe Gordon. A year after stealing 73 bags for the Newark Bears, Snuffy took 11 bags in 20 attempts. He had only 1 home run and 60 hits in 83 games. He had 47 walks and 25 RBI. At the end of the season, Weiss noted to the media that Stern Weiss likely would stay in a Yankee uniform if Joe Gordon was sent to the military. At the same time, several teams reached out to Weiss for Stern Weiss services. Similar to his early April performance, Stern Weiss did an excellent job making the front office look smart. 1944 came and Joe Gordon was unable to report to the Yankees in spring training at Atlantic City. On the other hand, Snuffy lost 10 pounds in the off-season and managed to start playing second base for the Mia Gordon. His United States military 4F status, unfit for duty, gave him the opportunity to become a star. A star he became, replacing Joe Gordon at second base and working with Crosetti. He appeared in a career-high 154 games. The speed Stern Weiss was known for in Newark returned. In the famous 3-team baseball game for charity on June 26, Stern Weiss outclassed the Dodgers and Giants during the exhibition events, such as the 180-feet sprint event, where he outraced Johnny Rucker to home plate in just 7.8 seconds. Snuffy Stern Weiss comic about his bag-stealing prowess. Lincoln, Nebraska Evening Journal, June 8, 1944. Yankees pic.twitter.com. Quimu 9E2, Adam Seth Moss, M.A. at Lacina, September 10, 2017. In a piece to Joe James Custer of the UPI, Stern Weiss stated that he studied every movement of the pitchers, helping to his stealing. By July of 1944, he stormed to 21 steals, 5 ahead of George Case of the Senators. While he was really hush-hush about ever beating Ty Cobb's 1915 record of 96 steals in a season, his speed became a nuisance to many pitchers. An American League pitcher, aggravated about Stern Weiss stealing second and third on back-to-back pitches, told the infielder, "Okay, kid, now go ahead and steal home and get the hell off the field, will you please?" Strangely, there is no record in retro sheet of where this exactly occurred, because all of his 2 stolen base games until the point were not consecutive pitches. Aside of his super legs, that led to a career-high and Major League-high 55 steals in 1944. Stern Weiss led the team and the majors in hits, triples and runs scored. The 154 games during the 1944 season gave Stern Weiss the chance to get 205 hits, 16 triples, 35 doubles and a strangely low 43 RBI. He also scored 125 runs for the Yankees. Those numbers were enough to give him third place in the AL batting title race behind Lou Boudreau and Bob Johnson in a season where the best players were overseas fighting for the country. Stern Weiss also appeared in all 154 games that season, playing a career-high 1,390.1 innings and making only 17 errors, while turning 117 double plays. No Joe Gordon, no problem. That 1944 team ended up finishing 6 games behind the Browns, but contained the batting champion and the home run champion, as Nick Ettin hit 22 home runs that season. Snuffy's season 1945 would have to be considered the year of the Stern Weiss. The year the estate of Col. Jacob Ruppert sold the Yankees to Larry MacPhail, Dan Tocking and Del Webb for $8 million. Stern Weiss came in as a part of the group. When the team was sold, newspapers noted his name next to those of Joe DiMaggio, Joe Gordon, Spud Chandler, Phil Rizzuto and Charlie Keller. His day had finally come. 1945 wasted no time throwing curveballs at Stern Weiss and his manager Joe McCarthy. After Nick Etten was reclassified by the military as a 1A draft status, meaning eligible to serve, Stern Weiss was called once again for a physical examination. Along with Etten and Stern Weiss, Oscar Grimes, Tuck Steinbach and Johnny Lindell were also called. If Stern Weiss was drafted, McCarthy would replace Stern Weiss with Joe Buzzers. Etten and Stern Weiss managed to avoid losing the service duty, but the Yankees lost Lindell to the military. Military status removed, the Yankees benefited from a second straight successful season from Stern Weiss. Stern Weiss played in 152 games that season, setting a career record in triples with 22. This also led the league with a career high of 10 home runs and a league-high 33 stolen bases. While the numbers for Stern Weiss were not as grand as 1944, he was just as useful for a team that finished 8,171, 6.5 games behind the AL-winning Tigers. His final line was .309, .385, .476 or .476 slugging led the majors. Interestingly, Stern Weiss led the majors in total bases and stolen bases in 1945, a feat only accomplished by those with last names of Wagner, Cobb and Klein. The last game of 1945, Stern Weiss collected 3 hits to knock Tony Cuccinello of the Chicago White Sox to make sure it belonged to him. Cuccinello finished with a .308. This was the lowest average for a batting title since 1905, when Elmer Flick of the Cleveland Naps hit .306. As a result, the Yankees offered a George Stern Weiss Day at Yankee Stadium. They presented Stern Weiss with a new automobile, and Joe McCarthy called him without a doubt the best player in baseball today. However, he would finish third in MVP, which ended up going to Eddie Mayo. The post-war years. World War II ended on September 2, 1945. One might argue, so did the prime career of snuffy Stern Weiss. Stern Weiss did not help his cause entering the 1946 season either. He decided to conduct a holdout for a raise he felt entitled to. As the previous season batting champion, there stood to be a good reason for a raise. Until then, he stayed up north to work out, being spotted at the New York Athletic Club on February 16. The media began to question his future with the Yankees, but Joe McCarthy killed any idea of that on February 26 when the skipper stated that a trade proposed with the Philadelphia Athletics was unlikely to happen. At the point, Phil Rizzuto had returned, severely underweight for baseball purposes. Stern Weiss ended his holdout a couple days later, February 28, and hit the Silver Meteor bound for Florida. Stern Weiss noted that he would sign a 2-year contract for $40,000 once he got to Florida. While details were not announced, his salary of $16,000 in 1945 turned into $20,000 for 1946 and 1947. Now, without a guaranteed starting job at second base, the Yankees had to move snuffy Stern Weiss to a third position during his time in the majors. Rizzuto returned to play shortstop despite his poor weight, and Joe Gordon also returned to take his position at second base. Instead of demoting Stern Weiss back to a utility role such as he was in 1943, Crosetti and Oscar Grimes were put back in the position. Unfortunately, the decline of the Stern Weiss was on in 1946. Appearing 129 games that season, he only hit .251, .340, .318, a massive drop over his 1944 and 1945 seasons. His speed vanished, just 18 steals in 24 tries. Remember, Stern Weiss was only 27 at this point. Despite the great McCarthy resigning in May 1946 and the team being rather lackluster for one that had a winning record, Stern Weiss' quality moment was appearing as a reserve in his first ever MLB All-Star game. The Sporting News noted that Stern Weiss probably would have made the 1945 game as a starting player had the game occurred. Teammate Charlie Keller went deep the day along with Teddy Ballgame in a 120 blowout over the National League. However, the man destined to be a Yankee got another chance in 1947. Dissuaded by the resignation of McCarthy and poor results, Joe Gordon was trade bait for Larry MacPhail. At the point, MacPhail talked to Joe DiMaggio about trading Gordon for one of the members of the Cleveland Indians pitching staff. After Joe D. agreed, MacPhail traded the second baseman to the Indians for the future ace Ali Super Chief Reynolds. This trade opened up second base for Stern Weiss once again. Now labeled by some in the media as a war product, Stern Weiss took the chance to become a star once again in 1947. However, the magic could not return as Stern Weiss numbers continued to collapse. Snuffy played in 148 games as only a second baseman. However, he only got 146 hits and stole all of 5 bases in a .256, .358, .342 batting line. However, the Bucky Harris-led team managed to reach the World Series after 3 years of mediocrity. Stern Weiss took home his second ring with a .259, .429, .333 batting line in 27 at-bats. He played in all 7 games. This would be his most postseason experience. He only played in 1 game and got 1 appearance in the 1943 World Series. 1948 was not much of an improvement for Stern Weiss. That season, the sapped speedster participated in 141 games as the second baseman for Bucky Harris. He replicated most of the 1947 stats except in one area, which for a time was a record. His defense never fell down, and working with Phil Rizzuto turned a lot of double plays. Stern Weiss managed to set records for the best fielding percentage for a second baseman, .9930, and the fewest errors at second base, 5. These records held until 1964 and 1988 and were probably the last thing that the Great War Man ever did. Rizzuto finished the 1948 season with a .252, .360, .336 batting line, in line with his averages post-1945. His speed was still mere, with only 5 steals in 9 attempts after 5 in 8 the previous season. It was a fall from grace from the man who had won a batting title 3 years before. To add insult to injury, Stern Weiss hurt himself on October 22 in North Dakota, pulling a leg tendon during a Birdie Tibbetts Baseball All-Stars appearance. Coming into the 1949 season, baseball writers were baffled to what happened to Stern Weiss. They were wondering what contributed to a bad 1948 season, and it seemed to lean on Rizzuto and Stern Weiss having awful numbers. General belief is that Stern Weiss came into the 1948 season severely overweight, if you call 188 pounds overweight. He lost weight coming into spring training of 1949, and the hope was that he would get back to his speedy self. Injuries also got to Stern Weiss in 1949. Stern Weiss was named the starter at second base for the 3rd straight season post Joe Gordon's trade. However, on opening day, he was spiked in the hand, and the position was handed to a rookie, Jerry Coleman. Reduced to an utility infielder, Stern Weiss' game was further reduced, slashing a .261, .380, .338 line in 70 games. The stolen base total dropped to 3 and signaled the end of any hope for his speed to return. He did get his 3rd ring, as he barely appeared in the 1949 World Series at all. The end snuffy Stern Weiss in the Rochester Democrat Chronicle, bagging a 175-pound spike hornbuck in December 1949. YankeesPick.Twitter.com .6 off. Adam Seth Moss, M.A. at Lacina, September 12, 2017. Humorously, before the 1950 season began, Stern Weiss was photographed by the media catching and bagging a 175-pound spike hornbuck at the Crockett camps up in Maine. In January, he was spotted giving young fans advice at a charity event in the Spring Lake, New Jersey American Legion Post. That night, the boys, all of which suffered from polio, got to meet Stern Weiss personally, and he signed many items for them. At the same time, the media did ask Stern Weiss what he felt about being the subject of numerous trade talks during the 19,491,950 off-season. He felt like he was going to be a Yankee through 1950, but knew that being traded was possible. Stern Weiss spent his time as a Yankee in 1950 as a Pine Rider, appearing in 7 games and getting 2 at-bats. No hits, no stolen bases, no nothing for a man who had won the batting title just 5 seasons prior. On June 15, the trade deadline at the time, speculation became reality. The Yankees traded Sternweis to the St. Louis Browns for 35-year-old Mike Ferrick, along with pitchers Sid Schacht, Joe Ostrowski, and infielder Leo Thomas. The Browns also acquired outfielder Jim Delsing along with pitchers Don Johnson and Dwayne Pillett. Coleman and a kid known as Billy Martin made Sternweis expendable. Zach Taylor, the manager of the Browns, stated that Sternweis would go from second base to third base immediately. With rookie Owen Friend installed at second base in his age 23 season, there was no reason to keep Sternweis at the position. Going to St. Louis jump-started Sternweis' bat a little during the 1950 season, but the numbers only came out to a .218, .324, .288 pace. The speed was still missing, as he stole 3 bases in 6 opportunities for the Brownies. In typical baseball justice, Sternweis got a game-winning hit in July against his old team, beating them 32, scoring Sherman Lawler. The next April, the Browns decided Sternweis himself was expendable, sending him to the Cleveland Indians in a deal in April 1951. Like in New York, they felt a kid would accomplish more than Sternweis, replacing the veteran with Bob Young. Al Lopez, the manager of the Indians, felt that Sternweis should be nothing more than an injury replacement, feeling Ray Boone was more than capable of performing over the legless Sternweis. That season, Sternweis appeared in 50 games for the Indians, notching 1 steal in 1 try, hitting .216, .363, .261 as a utility infielder. Ironically, as the 1952 season began, Tony Cuccinello and Snuffy Sternweis became teammates on the Indians. The man Sternweis beat for the 1945 batting title was now his teammate. While the media made hype of this, there never was a future repeat. The Indians let Sternweis appear in 1 game and released him. He finished the season at Indianapolis, Indiana, the American Association, batting .238, .390, .375 in 97 games. He stole all of 3 bases in Indy and was released by the organization after 1952. After taking 1953 off, the Phillies hired Sternweis to manage the Schenectady Blue Jays, their Eastern League affiliate. Despite being manager, he did play in 7 games that season as a player-manager. However, by then, his playing days were over. The Phillies reassigned him to a roving batting instructor during the 1954 season. In 1955, the Yankees offered him a position as the manager of the Triples, the Binghamton affiliate. After 1 season, he left and hoped to become the manager of the Richmond Virginians. However, the spot went to the former Yankee ace Eddie Lopat. After that, Sternweis decided leaving baseball was best. The champ is gone with an ever-growing family of 6. George Sternweis felt after losing out of the 1956 Virginians job that things would be better if he stayed home with Jane and kids. He got a position as the manager of the Sandlot baseball program for the New York Journal-American, a job that he retained the rest of his life after accepting in April 1956. Later that year, Sternweis became the solicitor of new accounts at the Federation Bank and Trust Company of New York, based in Columbus Circle. However, the years of chewing tobacco and cigar smoking caught up to the 38-year-old Sternweis. On June 24, 1957, the former infielder ended up in Roosevelt Hospital in Manhattan with what appeared to be a heart attack. While Sternweis denied this, the doctors told the NYPD that it was one. He was noted in satisfactory condition and eventually released. However, afterwards, he departed the banking company and became a foreign freight agent for Caldwell & Company, also based in Manhattan. Now working at 50 Broad Street in Manhattan, Sternweis was a regular commuter by train from his home in Red Bank, New Jersey. On the morning of Monday, September 15, 1958, Sternweis had a luncheon with executives in Manhattan to make. Feeling like it was important to leave early, Sternweis left to catch the 916 train out of Red Bank Station on the CNJ New York and Long Branch Railroad line, today's North Jersey Coast Line. In a form of unfortunate justice, Sternweis almost missed the train when rushing for the station from his house on 140 Maple Street. Sitting in one of the front cars of the train, Stern Weiss joined Mayor of Shrewsbury Township John Hawkins, also a stockbroker who had $250,000 in negotiable securities on his person at the time, Howard Huntington, age 54, of Neptune, a statistician for the New York Times Financial News Department, Elton Clark, age 72, of Mantoloking, a director for Allied Dye and Chemical Company, James Clark, age 30, of Red Bank, an art director for a New York studio, and John J. McDonnell, age 38, an attorney from Spring Lake, among others, on a train heading for Communipaw Terminal on the side of the Hudson River. The train, run by diesel engines and with, at the time, 5 modern passenger cars, left Elizabethport Station as scheduled at 9:57 am on its way to cross Newark Bay for the 8th Street station in Bayonne at 1003. However, when Lloyd Wilburn, age 63, the engineer, had a heart attack mid-commute, the train blew through 3 stop signals because of a drawbridge opening. At 1002, the locomotive fell off the tracks into the waters of Newark Bay alone, taking the front 2 cars with it, holding Stern Weiss and the aforementioned people. A third passenger car hung perilously from the bridge, in a picture seen forever in newspapers and newsreels around the country. It also eventually fell into the waters below. Cranes were called in to raise the sunk-in locomotive and its coaches. It was discovered later that the locomotive did not contain a deadman switch which would prevent such an incident. It was a long night for Jane Stern Weiss, who was in a panic when she did not hear from her husband that night. She called his 2 jobs, Caldwell and Company, and the Sandlot program, and was unable to get a hold of him. Jane waited and waited for her husband to walk through the door or call her back. He never did. Panic that he was gone came when he never made the luncheon of which he was scheduled to make. With every passing minute, it seemed likely that Stern Weiss died in the waters of Newark Bay. Jane Stern Weiss tried the best she could to explain to the couple's 6 children that the father was going to come home. However, his body was pulled up with 13 others in one of the cars on Monday night and identified. George H. Stern Weiss was dead at the age of 39. The last person to see him alive was the Red Bank station agent, who saw him board a front car. On September 19, a funeral was held in Red Bank for the former Yankee. St. James Catholic Church was overflowed with grieving family, friends and fans. Major Joseph F. Sheehan, the chaplain at Fort Slocum in New York, sung a Requiem High Mass. Sheehan and Stern Weiss were good friends before his death. Joe Collins, Phil Rizzuto, Jerry Coleman, Hank Borowy, Buddy Hassett, Allie Clark and Babe Young were the honorary pallbearers for Stern Weiss' casket. Also attending the funeral was Jack Farrell of the New York Yankee front office and a former teammate at Fordham Prep, Alex Wojciechowicz. More Yankees, including current members, wanted to attend, but could not due to baseball. Stern Weiss was buried at Mount Olivet Cemetery in Middletown, New Jersey, 35 years after the passing of her husband, Jane Powers Stern Weiss, the die-hard baseball fan who Stern Weiss fell in love with in Newark, died at the age of 71. The orphan Gerard Stern Weiss, adopting his late-adopted father's name in 1968 with the widow Stern Weiss in Monmouth County Probate Court. YankeesPick.Twitter.com 3Guy21WD, Adam Seth Moss, M.A. at Listener, September 12, 2017. It would not be fair to end this piece on a heartbreaking note. Thankfully, the Stern Weiss story has an epilogue. In 1947, the Yankees infielder visited the St. Michael's Orphanage in Hopewell, New Jersey. He exchanged stories and questions with the kids at the orphanage. That afternoon, a 7-year-old kid, Gerard Peter Gonfor, was really inspired by Stern Weiss. In the orphanage since age 4, Gonfor became an immediate friend to the Stern Weisses. Living in Lincroft, New Jersey at the time, George and Jane let Gerard and another girl come visit them on a regular basis. While having lived in different locations since 1947, from Red Bank to Shrewsbury, young Gerard became a constant presence in the Stern Weiss home. Jane Stern Weiss noted that he would watch her cook and always was quiet when visiting, an experience he could never have at the orphanage. When the kid was 12, he was fascinated in how Mrs. Stern Weiss would put ice cubes in a glass of Coca-Cola. While his visits from the orphanage dropped as the Stern Weiss family grew, his connection never died. Every Christmas, despite being older than his own boys, Gerard would get Christmas gifts every year. Before Snuffy's death, the patriarch had begun legal adoption papers to bring young Gerard Gonfalon into his family for good. Unfortunately, those plans fell into Newark Bay with Snuffy. At age 18, Gerard Gonfalon severed ties with St. Michael's Orphanage, the place he called home since age 4. In 1968, at the age of 28, Gonfalon and the widow Sternweiss, having since married Thomas Athens of Lakewood, went to the Monmouth County Probate Court and had the adoption made semi-official under the changing of his last name to Sternweiss. Gerard Sternweiss was now a post office worker, living on his own in Seabright, but Jane noted that he would be part of the family forever and that George would be proud of what he's done. Gerard Sternweiss is still alive as of this writing, along with an adopted brother, Edward. Snuffy Sternweiss may have been the forgotten champion. He won a batting title in 1945 that everyone has forgotten about because it was the war years. However, his impact on fans around the New York City area was entrenched forever. His charitable events, numbered in the dozens, made him someone to be considered a hero. Gerard Sternweiss saw him as a hero and took on his adopted father's name.